Hello and welcome to PlayStation Racer. My name is Mitchell Morgan, and during this series of livery editor videos, we are looking at how I created my most recent car livery. I deliberately went for a more minimalistic livery and one that was clean and modern looking, and I wanted a color scheme that was red, black and white, and one that featured color gradients. Over this series of 4 videos, we will look at the creation of the SVG files that we used, both basic and more advanced SVG files. We will look at using the livery editor's built-in color gradient panels to paint our car, and then we will look at the placement of sponsored decals, where to find those decals, and more. In the previous video, we looked at creating a very basic SVG file from a standard image file using an online resource. In this second video in the series, we will look at creating a more advanced SVG file using layers in Inkscape and how to reduce the file size to meet GT7's requirements by removing nodes in the SVG file. Throughout this series of videos, I will be using various image files, but it is important to note that you must always get permission to use any image file that is not your own. In other words, an image file that you have not physically created yourself. If you are using somebody else's image file, you must either get written permission, you must purchase a license to use that image file, or you must acquire some other form of license to use that image file. You cannot simply download something off of the internet and assume that it is yours to be used as you need. My advice is always to be very sure that you have adequate permission to use any image that you plan to use on your car. For the avoidance of doubt, and with the exception of the in-game images, I have sought and obtained permission to use all of the images used within this video. So I've just opened up Inkscape, and what I now need to do is to open up my File Explorer and just grab the image that we want to work with and simply drag it and drop it onto the Inkscape work palette here. I'm prompted, let's just bring this in the middle, for the image import type, which I'm just going to choose embed, the image DPI from file, and the image rendering mode I just leave as none. So basically I just select the defaults, and I could select don't ask again if I didn't want to worry about that, but I always let it ask me just in case. If I click OK, just close this out of here, then we are presented with our image, and I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so we can see what we're doing. And we'll make this a little bit smaller too. There we go. That's a bit easier to work with. So this is the initial image that we are going to be working with, image 69. Now it's made up of a number of colors, and we need to break down all of those into layers. And we do that by going to Path and Trace Bitmap. And then over in the panel here, you can now see that we've got the Trace Bitmap option that has come up. And we are prompted with single scan, which just gives us a single black and white color. We want to have multiple colors. So if we come across to multicolor, we've now got the grayscale. And if we select colors, then we can see the image. Now, if you don't see your image changing, make sure you've got live updates checked. The scans are the number of times that the software will run through this image to pull out the individual data. Now we can come all the way down to 2, but then we just get black and white. 3 will introduce red. 4 will introduce the pink shading. And then 5, 6, 7, and 8 will introduce additional levels of detail. And I have found through trial and error that for this particular image, 8 is about right. I then want to select smooth, stack, and remove background. And I usually turn off speckles, smooth corners, optimize, and the user assistance trace. If your image isn't updating, you can do the update preview just to make sure that you are looking at the latest and just make sure that it is all okay. Now, I wouldn't worry about absolutely pristine images, because the more pristine you get, the more layers, the more detail, the larger the file. And one of the issues with Gran Turismo is we need to get the image files down to 15K. So less is more in this instance. So once we are at a position where we are happy, we can click the apply button, and it seems to have done nothing, but what it's actually done is it has created a version of our image that we can now work with. If we go across to the layers, then you can see that we've got our original image, which is the one that I've just dragged in. So I'm actually going to drag that further off to the side. And we've got G210, which is the image that we want to work with. Now note for the moment that we appear to have lost the white. So when it was on the grey, that is something that we might need to consider, but we'll come back to that in a little while. So we've now got our individual paths and we can turn those off and on at will. And that's really useful. So if we've got them all turned off and then we turn them on one at a time, you can see that this path, this layer, if you will, is just the black that we do need for our image. The next one is this red color, which clearly we're going to need the 67 for our red in our image, but we don't need the red outline. We'll come back to that in a moment. This again is another red one. I'm going to keep that for the moment. This one is grey. Now there's no grey in our image. So we can go ahead and make sure that we select path 218 and we can simply hit the delete key to remove that layer because we don't need it. We've then got this pinky coloured one where we may well use that because that could be the shading. We've also got another grey layer that we can immediately remove. And if we turn this one on, we've got another pink layer. So we've got the bottom layer appears to be the shading, and then this pink layer just seems to be where the actual number is. So I think that we can remove that layer as well. Now we had a couple of red layers in here, and turning those off and on, they seem to be very, very subtle. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this one here. Now, if I turn on the whole of the image, you can now see that this image looks very close to what we're looking for, but we are now just down to 3 layers. We've already moved a huge amount of our file. Now, at this stage, if I wanted to, we've got a little bit of a red line around the outside that we'll come to in a moment. But if I go File, and if I do a Save As, and I'm just going to save this on my desktop, and I'm going to call this just 67A. And we save that. And we just go back to the desktop. And we find 67A. You'll see that that is now 47K, which is still too large to upload to Gran Turismo. So we need to do a little bit more work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the black because I'm quite happy with the black. I'm going to turn off the red as well for the moment. And when we get to the pink, we don't actually need this outer box, and it's actually bleeding through anyway. So what we can do, come across to the nodes and then come back and select our layer. And we can then just simply drag through these nodes and delete them. Don't worry if the shape goes a bit wonky. That's absolutely fine. Let's just drag through these and delete those as well. We're also going to delete that one and that one. And we will take out those. And we'll take out these. Just to leave the number 67. So if we just close that one down and go back to this one, then again we can do the same thing because we don't need the red part of the image bleeding through. I'm just going to go through all of these, just taking them out. Just to leave the 67. You can drag through them or you can just select individuals. So if I now turn everything back on, now we've got a fairly nice looking image without the pink bleeding through. So if we do a File and a Save As, and we just call this one 67B. We save that. We just go back into our desktop. 67B is now down to 45K. So we've saved a little bit, but we haven't saved nearly enough. Now, if we just go to the black path here, you'll notice that there are a number of nodes, and we can remove a lot of these nodes. So for instance, this is effectively a straight line. So we can just select that top node and delete that out. The same way at the bottom here, we can delete these nodes and remove those. Now, deleting all of these nodes is removing lines of code within the program that defines this image and that the computers read to produce the image. And we want to remove as many of these nodes as possible. Now, some of them you can see very easily. Others are bunched up and you can't see them very well. If you get into that situation, if you go to the magnifying glass here and you just zoom in, so I'm going to zoom in onto this corner. You can see this corner is actually a little bit untidy anyway. If we go back to the node, then you can see there are loads of nodes. I actually need to go in even closer than that. Sometimes you can go in very, very, very close. Go into the nodes, and immediately I can see that I want to delete this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Now I've got a funny little sort of line there. So what I can do is select those two and then change it to a line, and that will give me a more of a curve. So if I remove this one and this one, then I think that is going to give me a nice curve. And what I'm going to then need to do is come across to the other side of the image. There we go. And we're going to need to do the same thing here. So I'm going to get rid of that one, 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 and that one. We'll get rid of that one and that one. And then these two here, we'll just go in and we'll set that one to straight. And now if we zoom out again, we'll just zoom out on the top here. So now we have got those two top corners cleaned up quite nicely, and we can go ahead and do the same for all of the paths. So if I just turn off the black and we just turn on the 67, and then we go into the nodes, I'll just zoom in again so you get a better view. If you turn on the nodes, you'll see that there are lots and lots and lots of nodes in here. And we just want to be very careful on which ones we remove. So again, the ones in the middle we can remove. Clearly, we are not going to want to remove too many of the ones against the 7 here, because it could degrade. It's actually worked in removing that number of nodes in the 7. So what it could do is remove that number. So this is actually okay. But if we were to remove, let's say, all of these, then you're going to find that you get a weird shape in the 7. So you're going to need to just take these nodes out bit by bit by bit. And the more of these that we take out, the smaller the file will become. Now, I'm not going to sit here and have you watch me do all of these, because it will take quite some significant time to remove all of the nodes. But when you do, you'll get a much smaller image. So I'm just going to break the video there for the moment, and I'm going to load up the file that I did prior to starting this process. So this is the image file that I finally ended up with. I did move some of the shading around. I made it red because I preferred that. So it is slightly different to the file that we were looking at the moment, but you'll get the idea. So if I just go to path 8, for instance, and I've got the little node, edit nodes on, you'll see how few nodes I've actually got in here. I've just got a couple at the edges of the white section. I've got a couple at the edges of the black to give the rounded edges. If we go to path number 4, you'll see that I've just got very few nodes on the red shaded area. And if we go to 594, this is the number 6, very few just to get the shape of the number that I wanted. And 596 will give the shape there. So a very, very small number of nodes that we've got. And I did drop in a white rectangle just so that I did have the white background to my image. So we do a file and we do a save as, and we just go back to the desktop and we choose 67, and I'm going to use 67 final, and we'll save that. If we just go back into the File Explorer to the desktop, 67 final is now only 8K, so a lot smaller, and we can now very easily upload that to Gran Turismo. Now, if you have done all of that and you still can't get your file small enough, I've got one more golden nugget of information for you. There is a website called SVGOMG, and it optimizes SVG files, and it is brilliant. So if we open an SVG file, and the one I'm going to pick up is going to be the 67B SVG, and I'll just remind you, if we look at the properties for that, it is currently sitting at 44.3. So I'm just going to open up that one. Now, we may well not get this small enough to upload because there are a lot of nodes to be taken out. But in here, you can see that at the moment we're at 27.89, and we would get it down to 24, which is still too much. But in here, we can show the original, we can compare gzip. There's a whole lot of information in here and a lot of things that we can remove. So we can remove the doc type. We can remove the XML instructions. Well, these are XML files, so I guess you wouldn't want to do too much of that. But one of the things that I often find that we can remove is removing the raster images. And you can see by removing raster images, we've immediately reduced that down to, it says here, 935 bytes. So if we now download that file, and we just go back into where it is located, and that was 67B SVG, and we go to the properties, you can now see that we are down to 1.95K just by removing those raster images. And this website, which is free to use, SVGOMG, is an absolute godsend for Gran Turismo and getting your images really, really small. So once we've done all of that, we can then go to our decal uploader, and we go to open the file browser. Just going to navigate into my pictures, to my GT7 images, my SVG files, and I want to have my number red SVG. We will open that, and then we can upload that to Gran Turismo. Now, I've also got a few other images that we will need to use for our logo. So I've got a GT Clean, GT Racing SVG, my Mitchell Morgan Racing. So I'm just going to grab all of these. I've got the 67 red in without a box, my number white without a box, my number SVG. I've got the Pink Floyd that goes on the roof. Revelation logo we've already done. I'm just going to go with that. So we'll go open. And we can see immediately we've got our GT Omega Racing. with the racing at the bottom, the GT-OMG clean without the racing on it. We've got MMR black that you can't really see very well. We've got MMR red and black. My number red in the box. That was my number white. My number green, just in case I want a green one, and the pink foible. So I'm just going to upload all of those because we will be using those during the creation of our car. All of those are now uploaded and they are available to us when we get to the appropriate part within the process of creating our livery. So in the first video, we looked at creating or reusing basic SVG files that we can find on the internet, or files that we can very quickly convert to an SVG file using an online resource. In this video, we've looked at taking a much more complicated file that wasn't large enough. We have used Inkscape to remove nodes to get that small. And then we've used SVGOMG to get a really small file that we can upload into Gran Turismo. In the next video, we are going to be looking at using the gradient panels and the other graphics within Gran Turismo to actually start our livery in the game properly. So please join me for that one. If you are a current subscriber, welcome back. Thank you ever so much for continuing to support the channel. If you're new to the channel, then please consider hitting that subscribe button. I'm trying to grow the channel and every subscriber is enormously welcome. And if you want details of when I release these other videos in this series, then please hit the notification bell. And if you are watching this after I've uploaded all 4 of the videos, then I will hopefully link to these at the end of the video. In the meantime, thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.